before we move into the question, I'll just be giving a brief bio for Dr. Amina and for the National President for People with Physical Disabilities. So if you would allow me.
You're welcome.
Thank you, sir. So I'll be beginning with Dr. Amina Aldu. Dr. Amina Aldu. First. Yes, ladies first. Thank you so much. Yes, ladies first. Ladies first in our advocacy for equity. So I'll be beginning with our Dr. Amina. Dr. Amina is a disability rights advocate. She's an educator, a researcher, and a founder. I must mention that she is the founder of Rebuilding Hopes on Wheels Initiative, ROWI. She is a PhD scholar whose research focuses on disability, gender, and access to tertiary education in Northwest Nigeria. And she is a former council member of the National Commission for Persons with Disabilities, representing Northwest Nigeria, and currently coordinates the Spinal Cord Injury Cluster at the Zamfara State Disability Board. Dr. Amina is widely recognized for her advocacy on spinal cord injury inclusion, independent living, rehabilitation, and disability inclusive development in Nigeria. She has participated in several international climate change and disability engagements. That reminds me, you're going to be calling you back soon, Doctor, because I can see your participation in climate change. You're going to need your perspective on that particular topic. Then including multiple COP conferences, and has contributed to global publications on disability and climate change. Through ROWI, she continues to champion accessible healthcare, inclusive infrastructure, peer support, rehabilitation services, and the rights and dignity of persons with disabilities. And Dr. Aldu also serves as the chairperson, the Board of Trustees of Spinal Cord Injuries Association of Nigeria, and is a board member of organizations including Audi and Echo Smart Club. Please, an inclusive clap for Dr. Amina. We are so excited to have you on this call today.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes, so we are now through with ladies first. Now we're going to go with the men second today. Hope you don't mind. So I'll be introducing Mr. Rilwan Mohammed. He is a distinguished disability rights advocate, a development leader, and seasoned community mobilizer with decades of experience advancing the rights, inclusion, and welfare of persons with disabilities in Nigeria. Now, as the national president of the National Association of Persons with Physical Disabilities, he provides strategic leadership in championing disability inclusion, accessible infrastructure, social protection, inclusive education, economic empowerment, and the active participation of persons with disabilities in governance and national development. Now, over the years, he has held several notable leadership and public service positions, including serving as the first national president of the Joint National Association of Persons with Disabilities, then the chairman of Jonapi Kaduna State Chapter, board member of the Kaduna State Rehabilitation Board, and a special assistant on NGO and student affairs to the executive governor of Kaduna State. He has also contributed significantly to disability-focused sports and social development initiative as former president and vice president of the Sitting Volleyball Federation of Nigeria, and as a representative of the Paralympic community of Nigeria for the Northwest region. Then he has remained at the forefront of disability advocacy through his work as executive director of Beyond the Border of Disability Initiative and founder of the support organization for Muslims, Ummah, and disabilities in Nigeria. Now, his extensive experience in stakeholder engagement, political mobilization, policy advocacy, and organizational leadership has strengthened the visibility and representation of persons with disabilities at both state and national levels. Now, he's widely respected for his dedication to equality, dignity, inclusion, development, and what have you. Please, let's put our hands together once more for Mr. Rilwan, the National President for Persons with Physical Disabilities. We are so glad to have you here.
Thank you, Madam Elizabeth.
Yes, so without further ado, we'll be diving into the questions. Yes, this is the part where we see how we translate this commitment to concrete concrete stuff we can hold onto instead of all the abstract stuff we've been discussing. And yes, so I'll be beginning with, I know he's not going to be shocked, ladies first again. Yes, so we'll be starting.
I agree with you.
With Dr. Amina again. And this time around, this particular question borders on universal design and public infrastructure. Yes, we know we have the Disability Act. And of course, we are always going to begin with the public, that is the government part, because we believe that the government needs to mirror certain things, right? So we know that accessibility is often narrowly interpreted as the installation of ramps alone. You know, some people feel that, oh, when we talk about accessibility, especially for persons with physical disability, they feel that once they have given you a ramp, then they have fulfilled all righteousness. So I want to ask Dr. Amina this particular question. Beyond ramps, what does a truly universally designed public building look like within the Nigerian context? The floor is open to you, Ma.
Okay, thank you very much for that question. As an educator, let me start by asking, I know we Nigerians, we like partying, especially the Yorubas who go for Owambe. And I have seen during these Owambes, you see foods of all kinds being shared. And why is that so? Because you are considering the preference of your guests. So therefore, in universal design, it is considering the needs of everybody in the society. So any building that is universally termed as, a public building, and it should have some features that will consider the people that are going to be using that building. This will include persons with disabilities, those that are using crutches, those that are finding difficulty in walking, even the mothers that are using trolleys for their toddlers, and older people who may need to be walking slowly. So that is the kind of building we're talking about, that is suits everybody regardless of where they come from, whether they are persons with disabilities or not. The fact that they are able to enter that building, in their dignity and in their safety, and also independently. Many times we try to, one word that we want ourselves to be reckoned with as persons with disabilities is to be able to do things independently, so that we don't rely on our caregivers too much, or even strangers that you might meet. So if the building is easy for you to enter and, do your business, go and come back whenever you please, that is really what is termed as a universal building, which of course, in that building, it also needs to consider, certain features, like maybe wider doors, removing steps. When you don't have steps, it makes it a lot easier. You find that there are some buildings, when you're about entering, you still find these small curbs, which can be very frustrating for people on wheelchairs, or even people who are even standing. Those that may not notice about this curb there, they can easily fall, which is not good for the safety of people entering the building. So this is very important in considering these features and considering what we have in Nigeria. Majority of our public places are overcrowded, and not even that, we have poor maintenance culture, and we also have this lack of electricity. So when we are considering these designs, we may need to consider maybe using lifts. We can use other ramps, kind of long ramps that are able to take you from a first floor to the second floor, and instead of using electricity to power lifts, and which can get stuck or get spoiled, which can take time to repair, that kind of a thing. So in other features that you need to also consider during a public building, you have to also consider um, parking lot. There needs to be a parking lot for persons with disabilities, and which hello?
Yes, I think there was a little, I've muted
Yes.
the other party,
Yes.
so you can continue.
Yes. And you find that when you go to these public buildings or anywhere you see those ramps that they normally do, they just do them thinking they look more like ramps that like you use trolleys for, not for human beings to use. So they need to consider good measurements, the standard measurements, because before these standards were agreed upon, um, certain researches had to be done. And it's not just about building the ramps. Every ramp needs to have, railings, and also needs to be proportioned at the correct dimension that is supposed to be used and all that. So, and again, you see, when you travel a lot, you go to different buildings, you find that there's some entrances, you find that they are very slippery. So if there is water, or if there is rain, it makes it very difficult for a person with this a wheelchair user that is able to try to maneuver themselves on a wet um, surface. So this also needs to be considered. So when doing these designs, you are not just doing it for persons with disabilities, you're doing it to anybody that has difficulty in walking or can't see or can't hear, and which you would need to consider what is their need regarding that, what is their need through accessing such buildings. If they can't hear, okay, they may not necessarily not need um, sign language interpreter, but the signs should be there. I've been to a hospital where we went looking for a building, but because the signage were not there, what they normally have in public places, especially in Nigeria, is having the signboard right at the building. It doesn't show you when you're coming new, where you don't need to even ask anybody. Because sometimes when you go to ask somebody, that's when they will now, they might even tell you a wrong direction. So these are all the features that whenever there is a universal design, these features need to be considered in order to make it really universal. So it's more than just having a ramp with a railing. It has to be done properly, and it has to also have these other features that captures everybody's needs, and also to consider the building, especially when maybe in terms of emergency, the exits need to be there, and let the exits also be disability friendly as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Dr. Amina has done justice to this particular question. I don't think, so enriching. And I think one of the things that struck me in your discussion is about emergency. And I think it's something that we don't usually factor in. We don't usually think, okay, what happens when there's an emergency? So when we factor that persons with disabilities, even if they are physical, people that have physical disabilities, that their peculiarities are different, I think this will really help us in ensuring that everything we're doing is universally designed to suit the needs of everybody. Thank you so much for sharing, and that Owambe analogy you gave. And I just wanted to just give a little summary of everything you said about it has to how do I put it now? The person with disability has to be able to operate this independently. And you mentioning how these ramps need to have handrails, and then that these accessible features have to be easy to use. So it should not be difficult to be used. Thank you so much. Thank you once more. Yes, so now I'll be moving to, I'll also call him Dr. Real One, or if I like, I think for the purpose of this call, I can even call him Professor, if you'd allow me. So for our Dr. Real One too, I'm going to be asking you a question that borders on regulatory enforcement and government accountability, because in all of this, we must hold the government accountable. The biggest disability inclusion summit, which is known as the Global Disability Summit, took place last year in, I'm thinking Berlin. Yes, Berlin. And then after that, OPDs in Nigeria, that is Organizations of Persons with Disabilities, came together and put up an action plan to ensure that the commitment made by the Nigerian government is not a shelf document. So part of the items, the thematic areas, has to do with accessibility, infrastructural accessibility, and we have quite a number of commitments in that area. So by tracking a lot of things that they are doing, right, and holding them accountable, I believe is one of the ways that they know that, okay, we have expectations of them. So just to give a little more background to this question, we know that Nigeria has disability legal frameworks. Example is the Discrimination Against Persons with Disabilities Prohibition Act of 2018, right? And how can citizens, organizations of persons with disabilities and civil society organizations hold the Ministry of Works and Housing accountable for implementing the 2023 accessibility regulations?
Okay, thank you so much. You see, the issue of accessibility is not just within fix. The key thing is for the policymaker to key in. And the other one we say, Nigerians are very good in coming up with law, but when it comes of implementation, is
So I have a question for you. It's my second question for you. It has to do with, you just mentioned something towards the end of your response to question one about emergency, right? So this question still borders on emergencies strictly and conflict settings. Now, we know that persons with disabilities in internally displaced camps often face severe barriers to mobility, healthcare access, sanitation, and safety. And then based on this background, what are the specific challenges involved in making conflict-driven disaster structures, particularly the IDP camps, accessible for persons with disabilities, or specifically physical disabilities?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. Before I dwell into the solution or the answer, let's look at how the IDP camps are in Nigeria. We hardly have permanent IDP camps, and they use temporary IDP camps. Mostly they use either the stadium or the schools, especially schools. And many of these schools are not structurally accessible. You understand? So this has been a very major concern, a major big challenge for persons with physical disability. Why? Because you find that the terrain of these schools or the IDP camp, you find that there either stones or sand, which makes it really, really difficult for somebody to maneuver. And sometimes they ought to have equipments, like assistive devices at the camps, but they don't have. Why? Because maybe some of these persons with disabilities have left their homes, have fled, let's say fled from their homes, leaving their wheelchairs behind and everything. So it makes it really, really horrible in order to like survive within that IDP camp. The toilets are not friendly. You find that these are normal cubicled toilets that they have, and that's what people use. And a person with a wheelchair user, for example, is not able to enter that toilet, and which in most cases, when it comes to if there is no good toilet provision, you find that it is one of the things that increases the possibility of having gender-based violence, even within the IDP camps. So, and again, they don't have like there's no there's this poor lighting most of the time, because there are some people that would prefer to come outside to even lay, but they cannot do that. And they are cramped in these classes that are not accessible. And when they enter, they are not able to come out. When they are sharing maybe food or toiletries, the person with disability, especially those with zero mobility, like people with spinal cord injuries, majority of people with spinal cord injuries have zero mobility. So we are expecting that in case there is an emergency, the surrounding has to be accessible to be able to maneuver ourselves well, in order to even go and collect, whatever is being given, maybe food. So if we can't get food or have somebody to help you to go and collect that food, you find that the persons always end up being starved and all that kind of thing. So, and again, there is also poor healthcare at the camp, especially for those of us that need rehabilitation. Majority of people with spinal cord injuries, for example, needs to be doing exercises either in their home or they go to physiotherapy. So majority of the health intervention they do are minor things that has to do with maybe fever, or maybe they are people when they are traumatized. But truly, a real IDP camp needs to consider having this features and also facilities in the camp. Why? So that people with disabilities, depending on their kind of need, are able to access that care. So you find that even in our IDP camps, they have been built minor things that has to they have been it has been built with temporary, let people come, rush in an emergency and stay for a little while and go. But regardless of whatever emergency there is, there are people with disabilities who already have health issues and who need rehabilitation, whether in emergency or not. So these provisions need to be made. So if there is not, this is creating a huge um, um, problem, and which needs to be considered, because you might end up running away from bandits, or maybe running away from the house where it has been flooded. But maybe in a process, you forget your medications or anything like that. When you come to the camp, it's not there. You see, you're pushing that person into health health um, health issues that will eventually, obviously, is going to happen. So in every IDP camp, it has to be, inclusive of persons with disabilities. If we have had a good electricity, there are some that need maybe their oxygen pump that has to be connected to the electricity, or maybe their mattress, and they use an air mattress and which needs to be connected. So we need electrical outlets that these um, equipment need to be used even in emergency. So this is very, very important, to know this to know these difficulties or maybe the challenges. It's not just about sharing food or knowing the number of people, but you need to even know how many people do you have. Most of these IDP camps, they don't know even if they have persons with disabilities or not. They need to have a desk officer on ground, in regardless of any kind of emergency. Once that there is a camp or any place that is being used, so before it's being used, especially if there is a warning that there is bound to be maybe flooding, for instance, then they should go and make sure, involving persons with disabilities as well in our organizations, they can involve them in making sure that better provisions have been made, so that these challenges are not going to compound the issues already at hand. Imagine leaving your home in an abrupt, manner and everything, and then going to where it is expected for it to be safe, but it does not contain what is going to help you to live, even if it's going to be for a couple of days, and sometimes
it was
can
fine,
even spend months. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I will wait for the National President for Persons with Physical Disabilities to join us. I will just continue. So thank you, our National President for Persons with Physical Disabilities. You are back, and apologies about the network situation.
Okay.
So would like to reiterate the question. How can citizens, OPD, civil society organizations hold the Ministry of Works and Housing accountable for implementing the 2023 accessibility regulations?
OPDs and even people with like minds that have to do with disability, who are advocates of disability inclusion, can hold government accountable in the area of accessibility by critical engagement. One, the policy, most of the policy makers, even though they are part of those that make the policy, some of them are not interested in the policy. So be very sincere with you. Secondly, we as OPD need to engage them very well to let them know that the issue of accessibility is not a privilege, rather is a right as a citizen of the country to have access to any public and private structure in the country, just like what it's normally happen in other countries. Then number three, the OPD need to gang up in making sure that they get the buy-in of the policymakers in the area of implementing the policy and even laws that are on ground that has to do with accessibility. Another key thing is that to be very candid with all of us, the awareness is quite not broad. A lot of Nigerians don't even know that such provisions are there for persons with disability. And by so doing, we need to expand the scope of our advocacy, not just to limit it within the policymaker, but even some of the organizations and individuals who we believe have a voice in pushing for disability inclusion with the particular reference to accessibility. Hello? With the particular reference to accessibility, just like in reference to your question. Then the advocacy should not only be within the national level, it has to go down to the grassroots level, because most of our engagements normally happen within the national level. If you go to some of the state and even local government, you understand that even we as direct beneficiaries of the law or the provisions, some of us doesn't understand the provisions, talk less of advocating for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. And thank you for these amazing contributions. I think one of the things that struck me the most is you mentioned about the need to go to the grassroots, because just like you mentioned, most of this advocacy is done at the national level, and then the need for awareness creation. We will never stop. We keep advocating. We keep creating awareness until we see what we want to see. And I believe this is one of the ways we can hold the government accountable by engaging them on all levels, whether it be at the national level or at the grassroots level. Thank you so much, sir. So I'll proceed with you again to the second question. It has to do with inclusive transportation, because transportation, like we all know, it remains one of the greatest barriers to inclusion for persons with disabilities in Nigeria. So how can the modification of public transportation systems be sustainably financed to ensure that persons with physical disabilities can independently commute to workplaces and schools, healthcare?
The issue of transportation, to be very sincere with you, government on its own part need to invest on an issue of transportation regarding disability inclusion, because most of the transport business are owned by private owners, even though the law has to do with them. But if by the time government make a specific provision in terms of making a specific budget that has to take care of transportation of persons with disability, be it rail, public buses, and the rest. I think by so doing, that will give the transport owners an opportunity to also invest much on it. One of the major problems persons with disability face during transporting themselves from one place to another, like somebody with wheelchair, if you don't really even understand the issue very well, the driver will be asking you to even pay for your wheelchair, which the law have make it very clear and have made a provision regarding this issue. But another key thing, even we as OPDs and even some of the stakeholders, we have not really engaged the transport sectors to clearly stated that this is a provision regarding transportation system in Nigeria for persons with disability. So in this end, I think we need to do more as OPD to engage the transport sectors by clearly stating the provisions that is contained in the National Disability Act regarding the issue of transportation. Even at state level too, most of the states that have already domesticated the National Disability Act has made this provision of transportation system. But for a day, I don't think there is any OPD within the state level that engage these transport workers to tell them that these are the provisions, there is need for you to do this, do that regarding persons with disability. So if the transport owners have their own fault too, definitely we as OPD need to wake up and engage them to tell them these are the provisions, these are the needs, why persons with disability should be given a special consideration in terms of transporting his or herself from one place to another. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your amazing contribution on how we can ensure modification of this public transportation services. So without further ado, I'll be moving back to our Dr. Amina. Now, retrofitting existing public infrastructures provides critical opportunity to correct decades of exclusionary construction practices. What are the technical accessibility standards? What technical accessibility standards must be enforced during the 2025 to 2026 retrofitting phase to ensure that public, recreational, and healthcare services are inclusive for persons with different physical impairments?
Thank you so much for that question. Retrofitting, that's renovation, right? And it's very important in order to make the work worthwhile. From what some of the answers that Dr. Ruano has mentioned about persons with disabilities from the OPDs not being able to, advocate and all that. This is where we are going to start. I think JONAPID needs to coordinate accessibility champions or monitors or I don't know what you're going to call them, but there has to be a coordinated group of accessibility champions that are going to overlook these renovations going on. Because it also speaks on nothing about us is without us. We have the federal government having a ministry of housing and is it Ministry of Housing and Urban Development. We should partner with them. They should engage the organizations of persons with disabilities who would work together with them in case of any building that is happening. But unfortunately, I have noticed up till now, especially even after the Renewed Hope constructions, there is no way you will see any physical accessibility that is being done in such buildings. This is a huge embarrassment on our parts as advocates, and also a huge embarrassment at the government part, because it's showing that truly up till now, we're still being left behind in being accepted to be among citizens of a society or a country. So whatever there needs to be done, let it be inclusive of persons with disabilities who are also going to be watchdogs or maybe police the renovations. If, for example, now they go and concentrate on physical accessibility in hospitals, you would imagine there are some rooms, even in hospitals, that wheelchair users are not able to come and enter, you know, especially maybe in their pathology. They have so many tables and chairs inside, or maybe there's a step before you even enter the pathology. Imagine having a disability and sick at the same time, where you will have to go to the hospital, where you are expected to get your health checked and all that kind of thing. And those of us with zero mobility, I always say this. For example, if a renovation is being done, let it also consider having facilities that are adjustable, kind of, so that these facilities are adjustable. So any person that comes in, you don't need strange people to be carrying on the examination table, or you don't need anybody strange to be taking you, maybe to climb the toilet there when you have to pee after they need your pee for examination or anything like that. Look at what is happening in our airports today. The provision is there where you have serviced slots or spots where persons
Sound
with
pan.
disabilities are supposed to be there. But when you go, you find that there is no
Sound
space
pan.
for a wheelchair user to sit down comfortably. You have the chairs behind you, that are really protruding your chair and all that. And again, when you're about to enter the plane, the notion they have is people with temporary um, um, disability, or maybe those that can move a little fit, they can climb the stairs of the plane, or maybe they can walk to their seats from the door. This is where we need to come in. So anywhere that these renovations are going to come, where they're going to start these renovations, they need to understand it's not just, again, the physical aspect of it, but even within the plant, what is going to happen what do we need to do in order to really make it inclusive for persons with disabilities? There are so many examples. Having accessible toilets in these renovations. The accessible toilet has its own standard size. It also has its own physical features that you need to use them in these toilets. For example, the railings and the bars that you need to hold in case if maybe somebody needs to has fallen off, and they can use it independently without little or no help, and all those kind of things. And the same thing, if we cannot afford ramp, this is a huge challenge for our architects in Nigeria. We don't need to have lifts if possible. We can have these huge ramps all over the place, especially public places where, say, for example, the teaching hospitals now. I've been to a few teaching hospitals and I found out they have ramps. It's just that we seem to forget, to consider other people who are going to be using these things sometimes. What the hospital does is they think about their trolleys, whether for medicine, whether for theater trolleys, or else, or something like that. But they should also consider people that are full-time wheelchair users, people that are they are blind, people that are deaf, so that all these places, they are going to accommodate the needs of this diverse people that we have. And examination table, this is what I have mentioned earlier, to have adjustable. There was a time I shared in our peer support group where I went to a dentist and he had this adjustable chair. I was so happy that day. And you could raise it up, you will be able to like look into my mouth and all that. I was so happy. I have been to some previous hospitals before then, and I had to be carried, climbed in and out, having strange people to be holding you. This is really undignified. So when they're doing these renovations, they need to understand, and appreciate champions with disabilities who are keen on accessibility audits, who can they can share their thoughts together with the professionals and the OPDs, come together and bring out, solutions to whatever it's there for. It's going to be a lot easier that way. So it's not about which year, but how to go about it. When you are doing the renovation, it's not just doing because I have seen a lot of renovations. You see them doing it, but at the end of the day, they still forget. So it's a huge embarrassment. We need to consider the building code, and Nigerian government needs to take it up. The enforcement of this policy is very weak, and nobody is even doing anything about it. We, the advocates, we are not buoyant enough to be talking anyhow, because we may even talk, we will see the things happening nationally, but last, it will still come back to our own local environments, which, because we are a full body of persons with disabilities and we are well connected all over Nigeria, we need to start teaching others to become accessibility monitors in their locality, so that we are able to take up all the seriousness that is expected from the federal to the state onto the grassroots. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your amazing contributions and opening my eyes to see more into what needs to be done to ensure that this is enforced, and how we need to hold the government accountable. I think there's so much that needs to be done, though. So much that needs to be done, and learning about the challenges that persons with physical disabilities keep facing, and the undignified way that people keep attending to them. We need to really do something, and yes, and to ensure that
another typical example is when you go to a desk, maybe at the airport or anywhere, a counter, the universal design now is you have 2 spaces on the counter. The higher one, which anybody can use, and then the lower one, where wheelchair users can use as well. The most important thing, have somebody to attend them, because otherwise, when you go to the higher ones, they won't even see you there, and they'll be talking to your caregiver or your aide, which is very unfair. So these are all little undignified manners of approaches that we experience when we go to public places. But when you consider these things during buildings, it makes it a lot easier. And then you feel you are recognized, you feel important. Somebody is talking to you and you're talking back because you're the person that is the main reason for even going there. Instead of maybe asking your aide, who is clueless or even why you're even there. So it's very important. Let's coordinate ourselves. Let's start working, because we cannot just make commitments. We cannot rely on the government alone. We as body of persons with disabilities, we need, Jonapit can coordinate this thing. We know we can do it. Sit down with the Ministry of Works. I remember there was a signed building code during when I was the acting chairman of the National Commission for Persons with Disabilities. I don't know what has happened to that document, but look for it. Sit down with this Ministry of Works and then this urban and housing. How can they be having houses in Nigeria up till now without considering people that are disabled? Because obviously they are able to access these houses. It's their right, especially if they work. You understand? It's their right. So how can we, up till now in 2026, having these things? What is going on? The minister needs to be aware.
Sadly.
Pardon?
It's even getting worse, sadly.
It's getting worse. It's getting worse. Yeah. When I was doing my research on this presentation, I saw that there is a ministry of, when I was like trying to look at the building code and all that, and then I now saw they have mentioned that Nigeria has a building code which was approved since around 2006. But meanwhile, and even in that building code, it stated the inclusivity, of the buildings. But what is happening? Is it the architects, or is it the engineers, or is it us? We now, the soldiers. So we need to recognize ourselves so that we will be able to police. Otherwise, government, their mind is not 100% there. So we can just like try to partner with them let's portray ourselves as real contributors, because what is going to affect us? I may be younger now, and I may be staying okay, but what if I get older with disability? For example, I've already started getting older with disability. But the point I'm trying to make is we need to really tackle the problem of accessibility in Nigeria, and it does not rely only on the government. There has to be a partnership.
Yeah.
So no matter whether Germany commitments, or whether it's going to be Nigerian commitments, we need each other. The Nigerian government cannot do it alone, neither as we are organizations of persons with disabilities. We can't do it our own. So the partnership, we need to take it up from there after this. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for sharing. Because why I had to highlight that it's even getting worse is by the time you go to Nav Valley, that side of, there's a particular part in Abuja that is known as Nav Valley, just a little after AYA, you're going to see new buildings cropping up. I mean, and before we had bungalows, not story buildings, right? But now we have story buildings, 2, 3, and we have more, buildings that are not just ground floor again. So the problem is just escalating. And then you mentioning that there's a policy from 2006, if I hear you right. I think there's nobody to hold them accountable. We're not even tracking this, because I feel there needs to be like some kind of monitoring and evaluation that we need to hold this. And I think it's going to start with us, OPDs, persons with disabilities, because we are the ones that feel this pain the most. So I think we really need to push. We need to make more noise, because it looks like they are not really hearing. Thank you so much for your amazing contribution. So I'm going to be asking the last question to the National President of Persons with Physical Disabilities. It has to do with legislative accountability, and this borders on electoral inclusion. Now, something is fast. We have a very big masquerade approaching, and that masquerade is the 2027 general election. So this is why this question is very, very, very important, right? Now, electoral accessibility remains inconsistent across Nigeria. Despite pilot interventions involving tactile ballot guides and accessible polling units. Why I said inconsistent is because you will hear, oh, these states, they had ballot guides, these states they didn't have, this state they had this state they didn't have that. So having this as a background, how can the National Assembly and INEC move beyond voluntary compliance?
The issue of accountability regarding voting has to do with so many things. It has to do with the structure, it has to do with the ballot paper, it has to do with casting their vote. Like I know during the last election, I was able to come up with a ballot paper. You see, that has to do with people with visually impairment, then the provision of sign language in some of the polling. And when I talk about the structure, you see, we have engaged INEC on many occasions regarding the polling units. That's the answer they gave us. In fact, it was too clear to us that most of the polling units, not just most of the polling units, all the polling units are not property owned by INEC. You can see some of the polling units are public places like primary schools or the district head house and so many places. If we are to do that, we shouldn't be relying on INEC alone. We should emphasize on making public and private structures still persons with disability, so that whenever INEC are using any of the spaces as polling unit, you see that would not be an issue that the structures are not disability friendly. You understand me? And another key thing, INEC should not be relying on partner support alone. There is need for a clean and good budget that has to do with inclusion. If you can understand me very well, most issue of inclusion come up when maybe some partners are funding INEC in terms of electoral processes or any other electoral campaign. That is where they will not be talking about inclusion. But once partners are not on ground, the issue of inclusion will not be there again. So there is need for sustainability by the government making adequate provisions in the budget that will take care of issue of inclusivity during and even after election. Parties have to also create an enabling environment for in their various political parties. Also an opportunity to engage actively on the need of inclusion regarding 2027 general election. Most of us normally talk about inclusion when we are about to have the right election. Once election is serious about issue of inclusion. This issue of inclusion, not just within INEC, I think it should be a continual process day in, day night to make sure that people accept and even understand. I think by so doing, we should not be holding ourselves accountable or INEC accountable. Rather, we should be partner in progress to make things work for persons with disability, even the generation get on board, because the issue of disability is not issue of one stop. These are issues that we don't really know when it will even come to an end. So there's need for us to put hands together with the relevant stakeholder and create an enabling environment for persons with disability in terms of infrastructure regarding the forthcoming general election. We also need the support of media to make more noise in area of accessibility, particularly in the forthcoming general election 2027. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your amazing contributions. And thank you for mentioning that we must not rely. I mean, you kept mentioning about the things that INEC has been doing, like them relying so much on partners. And then you mentioned that I think, and I agree with you, that it is one of the main reasons why INEC is having problem with this voluntary compliance and ensuring enforceable compliance, right? I think I agree with you. And you mentioned something about these polling units are not owned by INEC. And just like Dr. Amina mentioned something that IDP camps are mostly temporary. So ensuring accessibility, it looks like it's not going to be so easy without us having some permanent structures. So maybe INEC needs to have more permanent structures, or a particular square, just like we have in Abuja, we have maybe Eagle Square. Maybe they need to have structures in all the states. I think because of the role that elections play in Nigeria, I think we may need to consider that, including for IDP camps. Now we have many buildings, like I mentioned earlier in Abuja, that are just lying there. Some of them have not been occupied for the past 10 years, and only God knows when they can be, when they will be occupied. I think the government needs to be more particular. We need to have designated portions, buildings. They can do this and say, okay, this is for IDP camps. In case, God forbid, anything happens, this is reserved. And then they ensure that this is accessible. And also, INEC needs to have more permanent structures, not that when the election comes, we just start designating schools. Then we can't ensure that, because we mentioned something about retrofitting. When they say, okay, use this primary school, there's no way they're going to make it accessible. There's no way. So I think we need to have more permanence with these structures, these infrastructures. I think for me, this has repeated itself twice with Dr. Amina and with the National President for Persons with Physical Disabilities. So I don't know, Dr. Amina, do you have any final words? If you have any contributions, maybe you felt you need to capture something, then we'll come back to the National President for Persons with Physical Disabilities. The floor is open for you, ma'am.
Thank you. The only thing is, this lack of accessibility only prompts us to be having a more difficult life, instead of us to have an easier way out, or in order for us to be sustained properly, you find that it makes it a lot more difficult, especially when we're talking about public places. They are places meant for everybody. So therefore, it's very important to consider diversity in human beings, so that, and having a government that would listen, and having people who will also police all these places. I remember the last question that you asked Dr. Rilwan, about elections. For example, I have observed a lot um, of elections. Many times, what I have noticed is even the problem sometimes has to do with the ad hoc staff. They are not properly trained. All that one about persons with disability don't have to follow line, and then the ballot box needs to be close by. I'm telling you, by the time you get there, even the people that are non-disabled will not even allow you there, and the security is less, so the people are not able to be controlled and everything. And instead of these ad hoc staff to be trained properly so that when they see a person with disability coming, or a pregnant woman coming, or an older person, they will work with will serve the person first. They will not, because the other people are the place is just crazy. And inaccessibility makes it easier for even crimes and unsafety things happening. So it's an enemy. Inaccessibility, to me, is an enemy for everybody, not just for persons with disabilities, because it makes work easier if places are accessible, especially the public places where everybody has the right to be there. So that's all I need to add. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that contribution. I'm writing it down in a very, very big, boldly in my book. Accessibility makes it easier for everyone. Accessibility makes it easier for everyone. In fact, I'm going to just put this as a very huge quote, because I think when we begin to realize that this is not just making the life of persons with disability easier, but it's making it easier for all of us, then we're going to approach it with more seriousness. Thank you so much for sharing this profound words. Accessibility makes it easier for everyone. Maybe every day we need to wake up and recite it for the whole world to hear. Accessibility makes it easier for everyone. Yes, because when you make the buildings accessible, then you don't need to even assist these persons with disabilities, because they can independently take care of themselves. Thank you so much. So back to you, Mr. Real One. Do you have any final contributions before we bring this call to a close?
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. I agree with her. That inaccessibility is enemy to everyone, particularly those of us on wheelchair, because it deprives a lot of opportunities for us. It can deprive you from acquiring education, living independently like any other person. So with this development, I think like the two clusters, the spinal injury association and the physical disability, maybe need to come together and see how we can re-engage our policy makers, our traditional institution, our religious organization. Like why I mentioned even religious organization, you go to some churches and mosques are not accessible to persons with disability. This will tell you that directly or indirectly we have been deprived from even worshiping our own God. That is, the worshiping centers are not disability friendly. So I think there is need for us, these two clusters, to come together and see how we can advocate more in the area of accessibility, because by so doing, it will give us the opportunity to get to where we really want to get to. I can share with you that there are a lot of persons with disability who are dropped out because of accessibility. Definitely, because some of their disability are chronic. Some cannot even use wheelchair by themselves. And those who can even use wheelchair on themselves, their aide or their caregiver, there are times that they will get tired. They will cannot be able maybe to back them or to take them to school to where they can learn or do one thing or the other. So I think there's need for us to put us together and work with the present policy, make a lot of noise, come up with a different strategy. If we use strategy A, if it did not work, we can still go to strategy B, even get to Z to make that it works. There are so many areas that you get the policymakers, particularly now that we are about to to go for general election. All politicians need is just vote, and we can maybe get an MOU with any of the politicians. If you give me A, I'll give you B. I think by so doing, it will give us an opportunity. Then number two, there's need for us to start anywhere where a person with disability who has been denied access to the public or private structure have made an attempt either to address this issue. Once we did not start getting the law, I think there is still a long way for us to go. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for we're so delighted that we have had the pleasure of hosting Dr. Amina and the National President for Persons with Physical Disabilities in the person of Mr. Rilwan Mohammed. Thank you so much for your amazing contributions on how we can move this from commitment to concrete things that we can hold on to. Thank you for mentioning about how to hold the government accountable. I would like to mention something you just highlighted, Mr. Rilwan. You talked about re-engaging, yes, and you spoke about ensuring that we engage the churches and the mosques. Yes, very, very important. Just like you mentioned, many mosques are also very, very inaccessible and for persons with disabilities. And then thank you for highlighting the need to work with the present policies. Now when you go for certain engagement, people are beginning to mention, oh, we need to amend this law, but we are not even using the one we presently have. So I think it's very, very important, that point you mentioned about, let us even work with the one we presently have before we will speak about amending anything. Thank you so much for joining this call and for contributing to this topic on ensuring accessible infrastructure. Thank you so much. We look forward to hosting you some other time to touch on amazing or deep issues that affect persons with disabilities. Thank you so much. And thank you for every other person who joined this call.
Thank you.
Yes, we apologize about the glitches we encountered today. Thank you so much. Yes.